Eliza's breath caught in her throat. She knew exactly what those whispers meant. When a family's name was dragged through scandal, people stopped seeing a person and started seeing an opportunity. She straightened her shoulders anyway. Whatever waited upstairs, she refused to walk toward it like a broken thing. The attendant pushed open the narrow door that led to the staircase. Warm light spilled down the steps, along with the muffled hum of voices. Laughter. Glasses clinking. The sound of wealthy men entertaining themselves. Each step upward felt heavier than the last. By the time Eliza reached the top, the auction room was already full. Rich fabrics shimmered beneath the glow of gas lamps. Gentlemen in tailored coats leaned casually against polished railings while a few elegantly dressed ladies observed from the balcony above, curiosity gleaming in their eyes. To them, this was an evening spectacle. To Eliza, it was the end of everything she once was. Mr. Pembroke stepped forward with theatrical enthusiasm, clapping his hands to quiet the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced smoothly, "our final offering of the evening." All eyes turned toward her. Eliza felt the weight of those stares immediately, assessing, dismissive, calculating. Some men studied her as if inspecting livestock. Others whispered to each other behind gloved hands. A few simply looked amused. Miss Eliza Harrington, Pembroke continued. Educated, well-spoken, trained in music and languages. A most unique acquisition for the discerning household. A murmur rippled through the room. But it wasn't admiration. It was doubt. "Do remember," Pembroke added quickly, sensing hesitation, "her labor contract extends for 7 full years. An excellent arrangement for any gentleman in need of refined assistance." Silence followed. No one raised a hand. Eliza kept her gaze fixed ahead, refusing to let the humiliation show on her face. But inside, something fragile was cracking. 7 years of service, and not a single person believed she was worth the price. Pembroke cleared his throat and forced a thin smile. "Shall we begin at £500? Still nothing. The silence grew uncomfortable. A few men exchanged glances. One chuckled quietly and turned away. Another shook his head as if the entire situation bored him. Pembroke lowered the number. 400. Nothing. The humiliation burned hotter now. Eliza could practically hear the unspoken judgment hanging in the air. A disgraced daughter. A gambler's burden. Trouble waiting to happen. Pembroke wiped sweat from his brow. £300, he tried again, his voice tightening. More silence. Eliza closed her eyes for a brief moment. Perhaps this was worse than being sold. Being rejected entirely. Just as Pembroke inhaled to lower the price yet again, a deep voice echoed from the back of the room. "I will take her." The words were calm, but they carried through the chamber like thunder. Every head turned. From the shadowed corner of the hall, a tall figure stepped forward slowly. His presence alone seemed to shift the atmosphere of the entire room. Conversations died instantly. Even Pembroke looked startled. Because the man approaching the auction floor was not just any bidder. It was Duke Tristan Calderwood. A name spoken across England with equal parts respect and unease. His reputation was wrapped in mystery. Some claimed he was ruthless in business. Others whispered that he kept dangerous company. Few truly knew the man behind the title. But everyone understood one thing. When the Duke of Calderwood made a decision, it was never questioned. His steel-grey eyes lifted toward Eliza. For a brief second, the entire room disappeared. The noise, the whispers, the judgment, all of it faded beneath the intensity of his gaze. He studied her as though searching for something beyond what everyone else saw. Not a burden. Not a scandal. Something else entirely. Pembroke recovered first. "Why, Your Grace," he stammered, bowing slightly. "You wish to place a bid?" Tristan didn't even glance at him. His attention remained fixed on Eliza. "Yes," he said simply. The room waited. "How much, Your Grace?" Pembroke asked carefully. A faint, almost amused smile touched the Duke's lips. "I will pay the full debt." The crowd erupted in stunned whispers. £3,000. No negotiation. No hesitation. Eliza's heart pounded as the realization sank in. The most powerful man in England had just purchased her freedom from ruin, without even attempting to lower the price. But as his gaze held hers, something in his expression made her uneasy. Because this didn't feel like charity. It felt like the beginning of something far more complicated. And in that moment, Eliza Harrington understood one terrifying truth. Her fate had just become tied to a man the entire country feared. Valuable information, the auctioneer finished carefully. Eliza felt a knot tighten in her stomach. So that was it? To them, she wasn't simply a debtor's daughter. She was a possible key to secrets her father might have taken to his grave. Before she could respond, heavy footsteps echoed from the floor above. Chairs scraped. Voices rose. The auction was about to begin. Eliza closed her eyes for a brief moment. In the silence of her thoughts, she heard her mother's voice as clearly as if she were standing beside her. "You are stronger than you believe, my love. Never forget who you are." Those words had carried her through the darkest months of their decline. Now they were all she had left. "Time," the auctioneer said sharply. Eliza followed him up the narrow staircase. The room above was crowded, thick with the smell of cigars and expensive cologne. Dozens of men filled the seats, their expressions ranging from mild curiosity to open contempt. Some leaned forward with interest, while others lounged lazily as if attending a theater performance. A few faces were painfully familiar. Men who had once visited her family's home. Men who had complimented her piano playing and praised her father's hospitality. Now those same men studied her like merchants examining damaged goods. "Gentlemen," the auctioneer announced loudly, raising his hand to quiet the room. "Our final offering of the evening." Eliza stepped onto the platform. The raised floor felt painfully exposed, as though every gaze in the hall pressed against her skin. "Miss Eliza Harrington," the auctioneer continued. 19 years of age. Educated, refined, fluent in multiple languages, and trained in the accomplishments expected of a lady. He gestured toward her as if presenting an object for inspection. "The terms are simple. 7 years of contracted service to settle outstanding debts totaling £3,000. Eliza lifted her chin despite the burning shame. If they expected tears, they would be disappointed. "Let us begin," the auctioneer said. £50. The room remained silent. Men exchanged glances. A few whispered to each other. But no one spoke. The auctioneer cleared his throat. £40. Still nothing. Eliza heard fragments of conversation drifting from the crowd. Her father had dealings with dangerous men. They say he hid money somewhere. Trouble follows that family. The whispers spread like poison. £30, the auctioneer tried again, forcing enthusiasm into his voice. A well-educated young woman, surely worth that. A man in the front row stood slowly. Eliza recognized him instantly. Lord Blackwood. A man who had once laughed with her father over dinner. For a heartbeat, hope flickered. Then he spoke. They were afraid. £20, the auctioneer said desperately. A voice from the back scoffed. Not worth the risk. Another laughed. Let someone else inherit that trouble. Chairs scraped across the floor as men began to stand. A few headed toward the doors, clearly losing interest. The humiliation became unbearable. Eliza stood frozen on the platform while the room slowly emptied around her. The auctioneer wiped his brow, panic creeping into his expression. "Gentlemen, please. Surely someone." Before he could finish, a calm voice cut through the noise. "I will take her." The words were quiet. Yet every person in the room heard them. Movement stopped instantly. Conversations died mid-sentence. All eyes turned toward the back of the hall. A tall man stepped forward from the shadows. His presence alone seemed to command the room. Duke Tristan Calderwood. Even those who had been leaving paused, surprise written across their faces. The Duke was not a man who attended events like this. In fact, many people in London rarely saw him at all. Yet there he was, walking toward the front with steady confidence. The auctioneer looked stunned. "Your Grace, are you placing a bid?" Tristan's gaze lifted toward the platform where Eliza stood. For a moment, the entire world seemed to narrow to that single look. "I am not bidding," he said evenly. A hush fell over the hall. "I am purchasing." The statement sent murmurs racing through the crowd. Lord Blackwood frowned. "Your Grace, perhaps you're unaware of the circumstances surrounding this young woman's family." Tristan turned his head slightly. The look he gave Blackwood was enough to silence him. "I am fully aware," he replied. Then he faced the auctioneer again. "The debt is £3,000, correct?" "Yes, Your Grace." "Then it will be paid in full." Gasps echoed around the room. Without hesitation, Tristan produced a document from his coat and signed it. The paper changed hands quickly, the auctioneer staring at the amount as if he could hardly believe it. Just like that, the matter was finished. Eliza struggled to process what had happened. Moments ago, no one had been willing to offer even a few coins. Now the wealthiest man in England had cleared every debt tied to her name. "Your Grace," she said softly, stepping down from the platform. "I don't understand." Tristan studied her quietly. His expression wasn't mocking. It wasn't pity either. It was something far harder to define. "Circumstances do not decide a person's value," he said. Then he turned toward the crowd. "Miss Harrington is now under my protection. I trust that tonight's events will remain unremarked upon." The message was clear. No one argued. Tristan offered his arm to Eliza as though escorting her from a ballroom rather than an auction house. She hesitated only a moment before accepting. Together they walked toward the door. Outside, the cool evening air rushed against her face like freedom. As they stepped onto the quiet street, Eliza gathered the courage to speak again. "Your Grace, what do you expect from me?" Tristan paused beside the waiting carriage. His gaze lingered on her for a moment. "That," he said calmly, "is a conversation we will have at my home." The carriage door opened. Eliza glanced once more at the glowing windows of the auction house behind them. Moments ago, it had been the place where her life ended. Now, as she stepped into the Duke's carriage, she realized something far stranger. It might also be where her real story had just begun. Choice, and His Grace sees to it that they are treated fairly. You will find that this house runs differently from most in London. Eliza absorbed those words quietly while the maids helped her prepare for the bath. The warm water eased the ache in her muscles, but it did little to calm the storm of thoughts racing through her mind. Only hours ago she had stood on a platform, waiting to be sold. Now she sat in a marble bath inside one of the grandest homes in the city. The sudden change felt almost unreal. When she finally slipped into the clean gown Mrs. Whitmore had chosen for her, the soft fabric alone nearly brought her to tears. She had grown so accustomed to worn clothing that the simple comfort felt like a luxury. A tray of food waited in the sitting room: fresh bread, roasted chicken, cheese, fruit, and a pot of steaming tea. Eliza hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first bite. "Rest tonight," Mrs. Whitmore said gently as she prepared to leave. "His Grace keeps late hours, but he never rushes important matters. Whatever concerns he has with you can wait until morning." Eliza nodded gratefully. When the door closed, silence settled over the suite. She wandered toward the tall window overlooking the dark gardens. Lanterns glowed softly along the paths, casting golden light across trimmed hedges and quiet fountains. Somewhere within the enormous house, Duke Tristan Calderwood was awake. The thought sent a ripple of unease through her chest. Why had he truly brought her here? His explanation in the carriage echoed in her mind. "I want the truth about your father." But the truth was something she barely understood herself. Her father had changed during the final year of his life. He had become distant, secretive, often disappearing for long nights without explanation. Strange letters had arrived, sealed with unfamiliar crests. Sometimes she heard tense conversations behind closed doors. Whenever she asked, he would smile and assure her everything was under control. Now he was dead. And the secrets he left behind seemed to be following her. Later that night, while Eliza tried to sleep beneath the heavy velvet canopy of the enormous bed, another part of the house remained awake. In his private study, Duke Tristan Calderwood stood beside the fireplace, a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand. Across from him, his trusted advisor leaned over the large oak desk, studying several documents spread across its surface. "So it's true," the man said quietly. "You found the daughter." Tristan's expression remained calm, though his eyes carried the weight of many sleepless nights. "Yes. And you're certain she knows something?" "I'm certain her father did." The advisor tapped a folded letter lying on the desk. "The network Harrington was involved with hasn't disappeared. If anything, it's grown more dangerous since his death." Tristan's gaze hardened. "That is precisely why she's here. You're taking a considerable risk bringing her into this house," the man warned. "If the wrong people discover she's under your protection." "They won't," Tristan interrupted. His voice was quiet, but final. Still, the advisor hesitated. "And if the girl truly knows nothing?" For a moment, Tristan said nothing. He looked toward the tall windows where London's distant lights flickered in the night. "Then we will discover who killed her father," he said slowly. "Because someone believed he knew something worth silencing." The advisor studied him carefully. "And if those same people come looking for her?" A faint, dangerous smile appeared on Tristan's face. "Then they will have to deal with me." Across the vast house, Eliza finally drifted into uneasy sleep. But beyond the walls of Calderwood House, unseen forces were already moving. Men who had watched the auction from the shadows. Men who now carried word through the darker corners of London. Word that the Harrington girl had been taken. And worse still, that she now belonged to the Duke of Calderwood. "Book?" Tristan asked quickly. Eliza nodded. "Yes. It's the only thing I refuse to sell. My mother loved it." A flicker of interest passed across Tristan's face. "Where is it now?" "In my room at the boarding house," she replied. "Hidden beneath the mattress. I didn't want anyone stealing it." For the first time since entering the room, Tristan seemed almost relieved. "Then we must retrieve it immediately." Eliza blinked in surprise. "At this hour?" "If what I suspect is true, that book may be far more than a sentimental gift," he said. "Your father was a careful man. If he needed to hide something important, he would choose an object no one would think to examine." Eliza's heart began to race. "You think he hid information inside it?" "It's possible." She rose slowly from the chair, trying to steady herself. "If dangerous men are searching for it, then they may already be watching the boarding house." That thought has already crossed my mind, Tristan replied. For a moment the room fell silent as both of them considered the implications. Finally Eliza spoke again. Your Grace, if this book truly contains something valuable, then bringing me here may have placed your household in danger. Tristan gave a faint, almost amused smile. Miss Harrington, danger has been a constant companion in my life for many years. I assure you, Calderwood House is well prepared for unwelcome visitors. His confidence was unsettlingly calm. Eliza studied him for a moment, realizing that the man standing before her was nothing like the aristocrats she had known growing up. There was discipline in the way he carried himself, the quiet awareness of someone accustomed to conflict. You said your brother was attacked, she said softly. Was he also involved in this investigation? Yes. Then these men have already proven they are willing to kill. Tristan's expression hardened. That is precisely why we cannot allow them to find whatever your father left behind. Eliza wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware that the world she had known was disappearing faster than she could understand. My father was trying to expose criminals, she murmured. And now those same people believe I hold the key to his secrets. That appears to be the case. And if we find this hidden information, what happens then? Tristan met her gaze steadily. Then we finish what your father started. The words hung in the air between them. Eliza felt both fear and an unexpected sense of resolve. For months she had believed her father died a disgraced gambler. Now she was being told he had died protecting his country. If there was even a chance that was true, she couldn't ignore it. When do we leave? She asked quietly. Tristan seemed slightly surprised by her determination. Before dawn, he said after a moment. The streets will still be quiet, and fewer eyes will notice our movements. Eliza nodded. I'll be ready. Tristan moved toward the door but paused before leaving. Miss Harrington. Yes. You should try to rest. Tomorrow may prove complicated. A faint smile touched her lips despite the tension. I suspect my life will never be simple again, Your Grace. For the first time that night, Tristan almost looked amused. That, he said softly, is something we can agree on. He left the room, closing the door behind him. Eliza stood in the quiet chamber, staring once more at the moonlit gardens. Somewhere in a modest boarding house across the city, a simple book of poetry lay hidden beneath a mattress. A book that might contain the final secret her father died protecting. And if Tristan was right, retrieving it would only be the beginning. The desk and looked down at the scattered sheets of paper. Symbols, letters, and fragments of poetry were written in neat columns across several pages. It looked less like a library table and more like a battlefield of ideas. You actually found something? She asked. Tristan leaned back slightly, rubbing a hand across his tired eyes. More than I expected. He turned the open poetry book toward her and tapped one of the marked pages. Your father's system is clever. Each tiny mark points to a specific letter. When the letters are placed together in the correct order, they begin forming words. Eliza leaned closer, studying the strange pattern of dots he had circled. And the message? It's incomplete, Tristan admitted. But several phrases are already clear. He slid a sheet of paper toward her. Written across the page were several words he had carefully reconstructed. Dockyard. Midnight shipment. Ledger. Black tide. Eliza frowned slightly. What does that mean? Tristan's expression grew serious. Black tide is not just a phrase. It's the name of a criminal organization that has been operating quietly along England's trade routes for years. Her stomach tightened. You mean smugglers? Smugglers, spies, traffickers, anything that brings profit and influence, Tristan said. They hide behind legitimate businesses and corrupt officials. And my father was investigating them. Yes. Eliza stared at the coded page again. But if he was gathering information, why hide it like this? Because he knew he was being watched, Tristan replied. If someone searched his belongings, they would see nothing more than a harmless book of poetry. He paused for a moment before adding quietly. Your father was far more careful than most people realized. Eliza felt a strange mix of pride and sorrow. All those months she had believed he died as a disgraced man. Now she was learning he had been risking everything for something far greater. Tristan stood and walked toward a large map of London pinned to a board nearby. Several docks along the river were marked with small pieces of colored paper. From what I've decoded so far, he said, pointing to the map, your father discovered that Black Tide planned a major transfer of goods through one of these ports. What kind of goods? That part of the message hasn't revealed itself yet, Tristan said. But based on the fragments, it was something important enough to justify murder. Eliza folded her arms slightly. And your brother, he was attacked because he got too close to the same discovery. Tristan nodded. Yes. Silence filled the room for a moment. Then Eliza asked the question that had been forming in her mind all morning. What happens if the criminals realize the message still exists? Tristan met her gaze steadily. They will try to recover it. And if they can't? Then they will try to destroy anyone connected to it. Eliza took a slow breath. So that includes you, and me. Yes. Strangely, the realization didn't fill her with the terror she expected. Instead, she felt a rising determination. My father died trying to expose them, she said quietly. If this message can finish his work, we can't ignore it. Tristan watched her carefully, as if measuring her resolve. You understand that once we continue down this path, there may be no turning back. Eliza nodded. My life was already destroyed yesterday, she said calmly. At least now it might mean something. For a brief moment, Tristan looked at her with unmistakable respect. You are not the fragile woman those men saw at the auction, he said. No, she replied softly. I suppose I'm not. A faint smile touched Tristan's lips. In that case, Miss Harrington, we have work to do. He turned back toward the desk where the book lay open. Your father left more than one message hidden in these pages. I'm certain of it. Eliza stepped beside him. Then let's find the rest. Outside the tall library windows, the morning sun climbed higher over Calderwood House. But somewhere beyond the peaceful gardens and quiet streets of London, members of the Black Tide were already searching for the same secret. And they were growing dangerously close to discovering exactly where it was hidden. Something far deeper than simple gratitude. Every plan they discussed, every strategy they considered, seemed to bring them closer, not just as allies, but as two people bound by the same purpose. By late afternoon the library table was covered with maps, notes, and sketches of the Meridian Company building. Tristan rested both hands on the desk and studied the final plan. The office is here, he said, pointing to the third floor of the diagram. If your father's message is accurate, the ledgers will be hidden behind a false wall. And we enter from the back alley? Eliza asked. Yes. There's a service entrance used by warehouse workers. At night it's rarely guarded. Eliza traced the route with her finger. And if someone is inside? Then we leave immediately, Tristan said firmly. No confrontation. The mission is to retrieve evidence, not start a battle. Eliza nodded, though she suspected things would never be that simple. As evening settled over Calderwood House, Mrs. Whitmore insisted they pause long enough to eat. The dining room was quiet and elegant, candlelight reflecting off polished silver and crystal glasses. Yet despite the comfort of the surroundings, both of them were too focused on the coming night to relax fully. After the meal, Tristan walked with Eliza through the garden paths behind the house. Cool air drifted through the trees, carrying the scent of roses and damp earth. For a while neither of them spoke. Finally Eliza broke the silence. Do you ever wish you had never become involved in this? Tristan glanced at her. No. Not even when it puts your family in danger. My family has been involved in protecting this country for generations, he said quietly. Danger is not something we avoid. It's something we confront. They stopped near a small stone fountain where water trickled softly into the basin below. Eliza studied him carefully. You could have ignored the auction, she said. You could have let someone else handle the investigation. Perhaps. But you didn't. Tristan's expression softened slightly. When I saw you standing there, something about the situation felt wrong. Eliza smiled faintly. Being sold usually does. He almost laughed. That isn't what I meant. For a moment he seemed to search for the right words. I expected to find someone frightened, defeated by circumstance. And instead? I found someone who refused to break. Eliza looked away, embarrassed by the sincerity in his voice. You barely knew me. I knew enough. A quiet warmth settled between them, deeper than anything either of them had planned. Finally Tristan spoke again. Tomorrow night may change everything, he said. If we find those ledgers, powerful people will be exposed. And if we fail? Then the people responsible for your father's death remain free. Eliza lifted her chin slightly. Then failure is not an option. Tristan looked at her with unmistakable admiration. You truly mean that? Yes. He nodded once. Good. Because courage will be necessary for what comes next. The following day passed quickly as they prepared. Tristan arranged disguises that would allow them to move through the dock district unnoticed. He also quietly placed several trusted men nearby in case things went wrong. By the time night returned to London, the city streets were alive with carriage wheels, lantern light, and distant music drifting from wealthy homes. But along the darker riverside streets near Rotherhithe docks, the atmosphere was very different. Fog rolled across the cobblestones. Ships creaked against their moorings. And shadows stretched long between the warehouse buildings. A black carriage stopped several streets away from the Meridian Company offices. Inside, Eliza adjusted the dark cloak Tristan had given her. Last chance to tell me to stay behind, she said softly. Tristan looked at her for a moment. I know you wouldn't listen. That is correct. A small smile touched his lips. Then stay close to me. He opened the carriage door. Cold night air rushed inside. Together they stepped into the fog-covered street, the towering warehouse of the Meridian Company looming ahead like a silent guardian of dangerous secrets. Somewhere inside that building were the ledgers that could expose an entire network of traitors. And if they were caught searching for them, neither of them would leave the docks alive. Safe. Eliza froze, her heart hammering in her chest. For a moment, the only sound was the wind rustling through the narrow alleyway. Then she heard it, the heavy footsteps of reinforcements approaching from the street below. Tristan's voice came again, calm but edged with steel. Eliza, keep moving. Head toward the canal. I'll cover you. She swallowed hard, gripping the ledge with white-knuckled hands. Every instinct screamed at her to run, yet fear threatened to root her in place. Tristan, she whispered, her voice trembling. I'll be there in a moment, he called back. His footsteps retreated briefly, and she could hear muffled shouts and the clash of metal from the office window behind her. Taking a deep breath, Eliza edged along the ledge, careful to avoid slipping. Below, the dark waters of the Thames reflected the pale glow of the gas lamps, and for a heartbeat, she considered the risk. But there was no time for hesitation. Her father had died for this mission, Tristan had risked everything, and she would not falter now. She reached the corner of the building and carefully dropped to a lower ledge, then to the alley below. Pain shot through her legs as she landed, but she forced herself upright, clutching the cache of ledgers tight against her chest. Behind her, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. Footsteps, angry voices, the bark of a command, don't let them escape. Eliza darted toward the shadows, weaving between barrels and carts. Every step brought her closer to the canal, where Tristan had said a boat would be waiting. Her lungs burned, but adrenaline carried her forward. Then, a hand grabbed her shoulder, spinning her around. She froze, heart in her throat. Miss Harrington, a familiar voice said. Relief flooded through her as Tristan emerged from the shadows, his coat dusted with signs of the struggle inside. Here, quickly! He pressed the ledgers into her hands and pulled her along, moving with the fluid precision of a man used to danger. They rounded a corner and saw it, a small rowboat tied to the canal edge, lanterns bobbing gently on the water. Get in! Tristan ordered, and she climbed aboard, trembling but unharmed. He followed, pushing off into the fog-shrouded canal. As the boat drifted away from the district, the distant shouts of Lord Peaton's men faded into echoes. Tristan took the ledgers from her, checking each one carefully before tucking them safely under his coat. You did well, he said quietly, looking at her with a mixture of pride and admiration that made her cheeks warm. I knew I could trust you to help finish what your father started. Eliza exhaled, finally allowing herself a moment of relief. We did it together, she said, meeting his gaze. Your Grace. I? He silenced her with a gentle finger against her lips. No words. We live to fight another day. But soon, Eliza, these papers will bring justice. And those responsible for your father's death will answer for their crimes. As the boat slipped through the dark waters, the mist curling around them like a cloak, Eliza realized that despite the danger, despite the fear, she had never felt more alive, or more certain of the bond that had grown between her and Tristan. The city loomed behind them, full of shadows and secrets. But ahead lay justice, and perhaps, in time, the love that had begun to blossom amid danger and intrigue. The night was far from over, but for the first time, Eliza allowed herself to hope. Answer came in Tristan's steady, reassuring voice. For now, yes. The traitors have been arrested, the documents are in the hands of the authorities, and your father's work is honored. But vigilance is always necessary. Those who plot against the crown often have allies we don't yet know about. Still, he added, glancing at her with a soft intensity that made her heart flutter, we can finally allow ourselves a moment to breathe, to be safe, and, if we wish, to think about a future beyond danger. Eliza leaned into him, letting the warmth of his presence chase away the last traces of fear. I think I've earned a moment like that, she murmured. A moment to just be happy, without worry. Tristan's grey eyes softened, and he brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. You've earned far more than that, Eliza. You've proven courage, intelligence, and loyalty beyond measure. And now, perhaps you've earned the right to trust me with something else. She tilted her head, curiosity and hope mingling in her gaze. And what might that be? He smiled faintly, but there was no mistaking the seriousness behind it. With the threat removed, with your father's work secure, I hope you might consider a future with me, not as your protector, not as the Duke who rescued you from peril, but as a man who loves you. Fully, completely, without reservation. Eliza felt a thrill of joy and disbelief wash over her. I would like that very much, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. After everything, it's more than I ever dared hope for. Tristan took her hand gently in his, lifting it to his lips for a tender kiss. Then let us begin anew, Eliza, not in fear, not in shadows, but in light, together. As the carriage rolled toward Calderwood House, the city lights reflected off the Thames, shimmering like hope reborn. For the first time in months, Eliza felt a profound sense of peace. She had honored her father, helped save her country, and found love in the process. The dangers of the past had not been in vain. They had forged a future she could now embrace, hand in hand with the man who had become her heart's true home. The adventure was over, but their story, one of courage, love, and resilience, was only beginning. Than that, she had found a home, and a heart, to call her own. The grand hall of Calderwood House was decorated with fresh blooms and gilded accents for the wedding ceremony. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, illuminating the faces of friends, family, and well-wishers gathered to celebrate. Tristan waited at the altar, his usual commanding presence softened by the anticipation in his eyes. When he saw Eliza approaching, her train sweeping gracefully behind her, his breath caught. "You look perfect," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Eliza felt a rush of happiness and relief. "I think you've stolen all my words, Tristan," she whispered, smiling through tears. As she reached him, he took her hands, holding them gently but firmly. "Eliza Harrington," he said, his grey eyes locking on hers, "you have endured dangers I can scarcely imagine, shown courage beyond measure, and held a heart that inspires every noble part of me. Will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," she breathed, the single word carrying all her love, hope, and triumph over the trials they had faced. The ceremony was a blur of emotion and beauty, soft music, vows whispered with trembling voices, the tender exchange of rings. And when Tristan finally lifted the veil and kissed his bride, the entire room seemed to exhale with them. Later, in the privacy of their newly adorned suite, Tristan drew her close. "We've fought so much, Eliza, and yet, here we are. Together. Finally." Eliza rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "It feels like the end of one story and the beginning of another," she said softly. "Exactly," Tristan replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "One filled with love, trust, and the kind of peace we've both fought so hard to achieve." As they gazed out over the gardens of Calderwood House, the sun dipping low in the sky, Eliza realized that after fear, danger, and heartbreak, life had finally given her the happiness she had always deserved. With Tristan by her side, she knew that together, they could face anything the future might hold. The trials of the past had forged their love stronger than steel. And now, at last, love had triumphed. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the chaplain intoned, and a ripple of applause and joyous tears filled the small chapel. Tristan lifted Eliza's hand to his lips, kissing the ring with reverence and devotion, before drawing her into a tender embrace that seemed to hold every triumph, every danger, and every moment that had brought them here. Eliza rested her head against his chest, breathing in the scent of his cologne and the solid warmth of his presence. "We made it," she whispered. "Yes," Tristan murmured, his hand cradling the back of her head. "Through danger, secrets, and fear, and now, finally, through love." As they stepped back to face their friends and family, their eyes met, and the world seemed to fall away. Every stolen glance, every shared danger, every quiet moment of trust and understanding had led to this, a life chosen freely and wholly together. Later, in the grand reception hall of Calderwood House, laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses filled the air. Eliza, radiant in her gown, moved gracefully among the guests, but her hand never left Tristan's. Every smile they shared was a silent promise, every touch a reminder of the bond forged in fire and danger. That evening, as the candles burned low and the last guests departed, Tristan led Eliza to a balcony overlooking the gardens. "Eliza," he said softly, pulling her close, "we have faced the worst of men, uncovered secrets that could have destroyed us, and yet here we stand, together. I vow to spend every day proving that you are the greatest treasure of my life." Eliza smiled, her eyes glistening. "And I vow to stand by you, in every adventure, every challenge, and every joy, as your partner, your confidant, and your wife." They shared a final, lingering kiss beneath the stars, the gardens below bathed in silver moonlight, knowing that whatever the future held, they had triumphed over fear, injustice, and circumstance. Love, courage, and trust had led them through darkness, and now, in each other, they had found their forever. The Duchess of Sherwood and the Duke of Calderwood looked out over their estate, hearts intertwined, ready to write the next chapter of a life filled with hope, passion, and unshakable devotion. The night air was cool as they stepped out onto the balcony overlooking the moonlit gardens of Calderwood House, hand in hand, hearts still racing from the joy of their wedding day. The gentle glow of lanterns reflected off the fountains below, casting a magical light across the grounds. Eliza rested her head against Tristan's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. "It's hard to believe this is real," she whispered. "All of it, us, here, together." Tristan wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. "It is real, Eliza. Every trial, every danger, every moment that brought us here, it led us to this. And now, nothing can take that away from us." She lifted her eyes to his, seeing the depth of love and devotion reflected in the grey of his gaze. "We've fought for everything we have," she said softly. "And now we get to build our life, not out of necessity, not out of duty, but out of love." Tristan pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Exactly. Our life will be ours alone. Adventures, joys, challenges, we'll face them together. Always together." As the first stars appeared in the London sky, Eliza felt a sense of peace and excitement she had never known. She was no longer the frightened girl sold at auction, she was the Duchess of Calderwood, beloved and cherished, a partner in love and in life. Hand in hand, they turned back toward the house, ready to begin the next chapter of their story, a life filled with trust, passion, and the kind of love that could weather anything. Outside, the gardens whispered under the night breeze, as if celebrating the triumph of love's enduring power. And for Tristan and Eliza, this was only the beginning. "From a life without love," Tristan said softly from across the room, closing the storybook with a gentle snap. His grey eyes met Eliza's, full of the same devotion that had captured her heart years ago. "Your mother taught me that the most important treasures in life can't be bought or sold. They can only be given freely, from one heart to another." Eliza smiled, brushing a stray curl from Charlotte's forehead. "And sometimes," she added softly, "the person you think you're rescuing ends up saving you instead." After tucking in the twins and checking on little Charles in his cradle, Eliza and Tristan stepped out into the moonlit gardens. The roses, blooming as they had every year, perfumed the evening air. They walked hand in hand, sharing the quiet intimacy of a life built on love, trust, and shared triumphs. "Do you ever regret it?" Eliza asked, glancing up at him. "Giving up your freedom to marry a woman you met under such unusual circumstances?" Tristan stopped and turned to her, taking both her hands in his. "Eliza, marrying you was the best decision I ever made. You didn't just become my wife, you became my partner, my best friend, my greatest love. Even knowing how our story began, I wouldn't change a moment." Eliza felt tears well in her eyes. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you, too," Tristan replied, his voice steady and full of warmth. "Today, tomorrow, and for all the tomorrows we'll share." They lingered in the moonlit garden, surrounded by roses that bloomed year after year, a living testament to enduring beauty and love. The woman who had once stood on an auction block, deemed worthless by strangers, had become a duchess, a mother, and a woman who knew her worth. The duke who had saved her had discovered, in rescuing her, that he too had found completeness. Their story, a tale of courage, redemption, and love that defied fate, would be remembered for generations, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope and love can transform lives forever. "From a life without love," Tristan said softly, meeting Eliza's gaze across the room. "Your mother taught me that the most important treasures in life can't be bought or sold. They can only be given freely, from one heart to another." After the children were asleep, Eliza and Tristan walked together through the gardens of their estate, enjoying the peaceful evening air and the comfortable silence of a couple who had found perfect harmony together. "Do you ever regret it?" Eliza asked suddenly. "Giving up your bachelor freedom to marry a woman you met at an auction?" Tristan stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious. "Eliza, marrying you was the best decision I ever made. You didn't just become my wife, you became my partner, my best friend, my greatest love. I can't imagine my life without you in it. Even knowing that our marriage began with such unusual circumstances. Especially knowing," Tristan said firmly. "Our love story proves that the most beautiful relationships can bloom from the most unlikely soil. We found each other in the darkest moment of your life, and together we built something that will last forever." "I love you," Eliza said simply, the words carrying all the depth of feeling that had grown between them over the years. "I love you, too," Tristan replied, pulling her into his arms. "Today, tomorrow, and for all the tomorrows we'll share." As they stood together in the moonlit garden, surrounded by roses that bloomed year after year in testament to enduring beauty, Eliza reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment of perfect contentment. She had been rejected at that auction, deemed worthless by men who couldn't see past their own prejudices and fears. But Tristan had stepped forward and declared his intention to take her home, and in doing so had given her not just safety and security, but the greatest gift of all, true love. Their story would be told for generations as proof that sometimes the most broken souls are exactly what each other needs to become whole, that love can triumph over any obstacle, and that the most precious treasures are often found in the most unexpected places. The woman who had once stood on an auction block, rejected and alone, had become a duchess, a mother, and most importantly, a woman who knew her own worth. The Duke who had saved her had discovered that in rescuing her, he had rescued himself as well. Eliza and Tristan's story reminds us that our darkest moments often precede our greatest triumphs. When Eliza stood rejected